Hey there, my name is Blaine Keller, and this is BK Sports. My guest today is Randy Pierce. Randy is an immediate past chair for the Future in Sight organization. Among other things, Pierce is a beat baseball player, mountain climber, motivational speaker, and totally blind. Randy, it's my honor and pleasure to welcome you to the show today. Say hi to the team.
Well, hello everyone, and thank you for everything you're doing.
I know you likely get this question a lot, but for starters, would you please explain to the listeners how you lost your vision and how long you've been visually impaired?
Sure, it's a pretty key point in anybody's life to go through something like that. I was fully sighted until the age of 22, and in the span of 2 weeks, I lost all of the sight in my right eye and half in my left eye. And at that point, I was suddenly legally blind, which I didn't even know what that meant before then. And I thought, I couldn't do anything fun or meaningful, but the transition continued over 11 years. They determined I had a mitochondrial disease, and it brought me to total blindness. I sometimes like to joke I'm illegally blind now, but I have no light perception, and it's simply because the mitochondrial disease took my optic nerve. So my optic nerves on both eyes are completely dead.
Man, that sounds really scary. What was the thought process like in the span of 2 weeks, losing your entire sight in your right eye? What was that like?
As you might expect, initially some sad and curiosity, but quickly to anger and depression. Why me? Why did this happen? And even a little denial. There's 7 stages of loss that people go through, and some people will get trapped at some of those stages. And my first responses weren't all the healthiest. It's natural to grieve and struggle, and I certainly did, because it's no fun to have the mentality that I can't do anything fun or meaningful again. It's no fun to feel disabled or less valued, and that's exactly how I felt. But that's also not true. Right, I learned in a progression that you can celebrate ability awareness instead of celebrate disability. Of course I have a disability. I can't see. We all have things we can't do in this world. And the trick is, if you celebrate what you can do as being more important than what you can't do, that's the first step. And the second step is, if there's something you can't do and it's really important to you, then you find solutions, you problem solve, you persevere, and that gets you doing anything you want to do, which is probably a part of why we're talking here today.
Man, that is truly fantastic, talking about the things you can do rather than the things you can't do. Let's talk about the things you can do, which is beat baseball. Could you give a description of the concept of beat baseball for those listening that don't really have a solid understanding of the game?
Absolutely. America loves baseball, and whether it's playing, whether it's watching, and I say watching with a tongue-in-cheek because whether it's listening on the radio or however you're going to appreciate it, one of the best ways obviously is to be able to play it. And for people who lose their sight, that's a big transition. You have to take in a couple of factors. First off, the ball needs to make noise for you to know where it is. So beat the ball. It's closer to a softball. It's actually a little larger even than a softball. And there's a beeper in it. So now we've got a sound location to be able to track it. Use your ears instead of your eyes. And the second part of that is, so the pitcher is going to be on your team. Everybody else is going to be fully blind, right? So even if you're not, because sight loss is a spectrum. 93% of people who are blind have some sight. Only 7% are like me, totally blind. But even the playing field, anybody who's playing wears a blindfold. So we're all fully included. We're all on the same footing there. Now, pitchers on your team, and they're trying to groove it. You're using your ears for timing and some slight adjustments to hit the ball. And then how are you going to run? So what they've done is there's 2 bases. There's first and third. And one of those bases, after your hit, is randomly going to be determined. And it's turned on. And it gives up a high, steady beeping sound. Your job after you make contact with the ball is to listen, hear the base, and run to the base that's beeping. So you don't know which one it'll be. You have to use your ears for that. And it's a big padded stand-up so that as you're running to it, you can run over it, hit it with your arm, tackle it. It depends how intense and you want to play. And there's people who are diving for that because every microsecond counts. Because while you're running to get there in first, because if you get to the base, it's a run before they field it. If they field it before you get to the base, it's an out. And the reason for that is you don't have second base because you'd have somebody blind running with blind fielders, and that would lead to collisions. So it's modified. It's a little different than baseball. And that's the way I say it. You got to problem solve, maybe do things a little differently, but do all the things you want.
What do you think's more difficult, hitting or fielding?
I think that depends on your pitcher. Isn't that like regular baseball? You got a great pitcher out there in regular baseball and it works against you and it makes it harder to hit than field. And the reverse is true in beat ball, is if you've got a good pitcher, they're putting it in the groove, they're helping you with some verbal cues to get that timing down. Our pitcher in our practices, first practice up, I think it was hitting 50% of the balls off her. Donna Fanning, she actually is a volunteer at Future Insight. Just to fully credit her, right? They were there. Now, there are times that it gets harder. You add a lot of stressors, you add a lot of background noises. Those things are going to make it more challenging, obviously. So it's all up to the pitcher on that. And similarly for fielding, what kind of environment are you in? And that can make it harder to field. Think about in regular baseball, what's the infield like? What's the outfield like? Is it wet? Is it really sunny? All of those things change how the fielding works. And similarly, its auditory changes can make it more difficult for a beep ball player.
Now, from my understanding, this isn't just something done for fun every now and again. Beat baseball is an entire organization. What's the competition like in these leagues? Are there playoffs, championships, etc.?
There absolutely are. And, we just did an exhibition round to kind of showcase it in New Hampshire, what can be done, because we don't have a league in New Hampshire. Now, I live on the very southern end of New Hampshire, and I played on a league in Mass about 15 years ago. Got to play with a team called the Lowell Lightning, and there's still a team playing out of Boston. And these leagues, they have a World Series nationally that occurs every year. So there's intense competition. That's why I said microseconds matter. There's people diving to get to that base before the fielders are able to do the work that they do. And as such, that just shows you the intensity. This World Series is highly competitive to get on the teams, and then for the teams to advance to get to those finals. And you can watch it out on YouTube. There's a lot of video demonstrations, but ultimately, right, there's great athletes that aren't just great athletes for a blind person. They're great athletes, and they happen to be blind.
I love that difference you make there. They're not just great athletes for blind people, they're great athletes. But why baseball? Of all the sports that the visually impaired could play, what makes America's pastime an outlet for the blind in athletics?
So there should be no limit, right? Who knows what your passion is or was? You should have the right to say, hey, what do I like and how do I want to do it? And if you understand, for a lot of people, losing their sight is been a journey. Just taking in the case of Future Insight, we're gearing up because we are seeing an abundance of people losing their sight. And why? The number one cause of blindness is age-related macular degeneration. And as the baby boomers are aging into that era when they might get this, well, now they're dealing with sight loss. And I share that only because many people are coming into sight loss, vision loss, with a past of having sight. So they may already love baseball. And they may say, oh, I used to love that. It's too bad I can't do that anymore. And that's such a sad mentality, because the truth is, if you love something and you want to do it, let's find a way for you to do those things, right? And that's maybe why baseball, it has been America's sport for years and years. So why tell you that you can't do it when the real answer is, we just have to find a way. There's a great quote by Henry Ford, and I share it in a lot of my presentations. What he said was, whether you think you can or whether you think you can't, you're probably right. And as soon as you're willing to believe, you're on the way to achieve. And baseball, that's your dream. Let's make it real. And for lots of American youth and adults, it is the great American dream.
Yeah, definitely. I love that quote. As I mentioned earlier, and as you've talked a little bit about, you're a board member and a player for the Future Insight organization. F.I.S. is a nonprofit that is dedicated to transforming the lives of those who are blind or visually impaired and their families. I would love to hear about how they have impacted you in your life.
You bet. I shared all the notions of how I was sad, maybe angry and depressed and denial. I really did believe I'd never do anything fun or important. I'm a person who said, yeah, I can't play baseball again. I can't do anything anymore. And the reason I no longer believe that, the reason now I believe the only limits on me are the ones I self-impose, is because of Future Insight. Because what they do is they come in and they say, we understand how you feel. They start out with a social worker that says, let's evaluate what's going on with your sight. Let's understand it enough to say, what do you want to accomplish? What do you need to accomplish, and how can we help you get there? Because like anything you want to do, you probably have to learn how to do it. And they have the experience and the familiarity with teaching people how to use a cane, how to get your mobility, how do you cook blind, how do you do personal care. They start there, but they're not going to stop there. It's not just about the essentials so you exist. It's how do you live, thrive. Because that's what we all want, is the chance to figure out ways that we can live and thrive and be productive members of this wonderful race. Amongst the things I do, I run a lot of marathons. And the race I care about most is the human race. How do we all get to be good contributors of this human race? And it starts with learning to help each other out along that way. And that's what Future Insight's mission is. Let's take this one group, people who maybe have a reason to have started to doubt, started to question what they can do, and show them they don't need to. There's solutions, there's training and skills that they can learn, and some services that can help them to put them on that path to achieving everything they want, to reaching our peak potential, as I like to say, for the mountain climber inside me.
It's really important that you mentioned, the simple things. Because as some of the listeners may know, my father is fully diagnosed with glaucoma. He cannot see at all. Been that way since 1991. But when I ask him, what are some of the biggest accomplishments you've done in your life? He just talks about adapting to life since being diagnosed. The ability to cook, the ability to vacuum and clean his own house, things like that. He says those are the most important things in his life.
Absolutely, because there's so many things you take for granted that are the foundation, and you have to relearn all of those things. And relearning, the later in life you're trying to relearn, the harder it is to relearn. And so it is a tremendous accomplishment, but I also think it doesn't need to stop there, right? Those are great accomplishments, but what else you want, those are all out there for you as well, if you want. That's what I want. I don't want to say that everybody should be playing deep baseball or, climbing mountains, but I want everybody to know that they don't have to be limited by their sight. They're only limited by their imagination and maybe by their fortune of having a great organization like Future Insight. The good news is there's lots of such organizations and lots of great people that are willing to say, hey, how can we help train? And the trick is, how do we get the information out there? And the information sharers like yourself, that's what we need.
I totally agree with that. When talking about Future Insight, it's hard not to mention the opportunity your team, the Knights, had, which was to play the New Hampshire Fisher Cats back in August. Describe the emotions you felt not only playing, but throwing the first pitch against the Blue Jays AA affiliate.
Well, there's a few people. There was this young sight-impaired girl, Delaney, who actually threw out the first pitch right after me. And I don't know, maybe her pitch was a little bit better, and she's a third grader, so I don't know that I get too much credit here. But there's a lot of excitement around a big event like that. I mean, they're in the playoffs right now. Friday night, they're going to open up at their Eastern Conference playoff series. So they are a happening team. And we're at a packed stadium full of people who want to see, what is this like? And one of the first big takeaways that we all knew as players was we'd already heard how their practices went. What their practices taught them is, hey, this is hard. Now, why was it hard? Because these are professional players, and this is their executive front office who live for baseball. Why did they find it hard? It's because for them, sight loss was instantaneous. That's not really what we deal with. Most of us have been in some level of sight loss. We've had time to adapt, and that's what humans do well, right? We adapt, we learn. They didn't have that opportunity. So they had a harder road on that front. But what it gave them was an immediate appreciation of what we deal with every day. And how many stories of, like your dad, of individual courage and just learning how to do the simple things, right? Approaching a stove when you can't see to learn how to manage all of those things and realize that you're not just taking risks and doing this foolishly, but that you learn the systems so that you're going to do it safely and make them feel that's edible. Because we're not just trying to find a way to get by today. We want to try to find a way that we can, live independently and healthy going forward. So that was the first thing, is hearing that they understood our situation with a little more clarity of vision by losing their sight. But the second part is getting caught in the moment. This was baseball. We're out on a field. We're hearing people screaming for us and cheering. There's one play I heard my great nephew shout out from the crowd in support of me. And I heard lots of that from the crowd. Some of the folks that were out there running, they hadn't been out in a situation to feel a stadium cheering for them, right? To feel like they have advanced to something different. And that's really phenomenal, I think, to see that ability awareness taken to that level.
I love how you talked about, sight loss isn't something that's instantaneous. This is something that's gradual. And when talking about your gradual achievements, learning an entire game based on sound, I've also heard that you run your own nonprofit organization, you're a motivational speaker, and that you've even climbed Mount Kilimanjaro. Tell us about that.
So, my condition, I have a neurological condition. So I spent a couple of years in a wheelchair. And when you can't walk, you really learn how to appreciate the gift that's there. So I learned to hike coming out of that chair because I want to celebrate that. And I've just been fortunate to take it to lots of levels. But Kilimanjaro is the tallest standalone mountain in the world, right? So obviously Everest is taller, and Everest comes with a big cost, which is prohibitive. I'd rather put that money to ways to help the world. For me personally, I wanted to experience touching the top of the world. I wanted to be on one of the pillars of the earth. And I put a team together, and we got to do that. And we got to be up there with glaciers on the side of us, where so high you can see the curvature of the earth as the sun rises, because you hit the peak as the sun's rising. And I don't get to see the sun, but I can feel it on my face. I can hear and see through the eyes of my friends, just like I help them share the experience in a different way as well. But I listen to their description, and I put that image together, that beautiful scene of the Moenza Peak, which thrust up like a spiry castle to the side, And we looked out across all of the distant of Africa's Serengeti to see the rays of the sun shoot out across and reflect off the glaciers. And just think, this is such a rarefied location, but it's not out of reach because nothing is. That's a moment I'll see. I've hiked in the Andes and I've hiked all through New Hampshire, but the point isn't each individual hike, it's the whole of the journey. Just be out there to follow your dreams and know that that's possible, and probably the best way, and it ties right back to baseball, and I'll end to throw back to what you have, but you do these things usually not alone for me. I do it with a team, because learning to work together with people, makes team an acronym, TEAM. Together, everyone achieves more. When you learn to work together well, that's how you get to reach your peak potential. When you get in the way of each other, when you don't work together well, that can bring you down. But that's why the goal is to work together better, because to reach our best, you put your energy to growth. You take a catalyst like maybe adversity, maybe going blind, or, we all have challenges in our world, whether you're sighted or not. And what do you do with that challenge? Do you let it defeat you, or do you let it become the opportunity to say, I'm going to grow, be a little bit better today than I was yesterday from this, because this is my opportunity. And when you do that, you start learning about positive adversity, not negative adversity. It's why going blind for me wasn't the worst thing that happened in my life, as some might think, but maybe one of the best things that happened.
That's incredible. I really thank you for your time today, Randy. Your story is truly inspiring and encouraging. If you have anything else you'd like to add today, the floor is yours.
The other thing I'll add, I just finished my book, See You at the Summit, My Journey from the Depths of Loss to the Heights of Achievement, and it'll be out November 17th. So if you like a little piece of what you've heard, then I've got a nice fair bit of that story to share. So think about that.
Guys, thank you so much for watching today. I appreciate your time, and a huge thank you to Randy Pierce and the Future in Sight organization for this incredible opportunity. If you like what I had to say, or probably what Randy had to say, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe. Let me know how I did. Thank you guys. Have a good day.